I don't know. We're okay. We're good. I think we're gonna get our funding up. Yeah, no, we're done with that one. It's gonna be. Okay, here's, looks like a pencil. There's a, something. Do another one?
This is the call to order the Las Cruces Public Schools Board of Education regular meeting, Tuesday, February 18th, 2014. Mr. Davis, will you please take roll?
Ms. Hall,
I'm here.
Dr. Votaw,
Here.
I'm here, Chair's here, we have six.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Give me time. Oh.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Salute the flag.
Leslie,
I'm gonna ask
the
our
name
salute.
plates are backwards. Plates.
We're gonna ask our salute the flag.
We need to be seated.
Dr. Fultz, Dr. Votar.
We have the wrong nameplates,
Oh,
Madam President. We're
thank you for
switching it so we know who we are.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Superintendent Rounds.
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight, we have the pleasure of welcoming the Columbia Elementary School Chorus and their director, Emily Freaky. The Columbia Chorus has approximately 45 members ranging from 3rd to 5th grades, and the students must each audition to be placed in the group. And as you may have already heard, they sound really good. Let me turn it over to you.
Hi guys, we are just so honored and excited to perform for you today, and we really hope you enjoy our short performance. I just wanted to speak a little bit about, not a lot, but just a little, about the songs that we're going to be singing. First, we're going to start with a patriotic number. We're going to start with America, which most of country 'tis of thee, celebrating our President's Day. And then we're going to move into 2 folk songs from Canada, and the kids will sing them each separately, and then you'll hear them be combined. So they're going to do some harmony. Even though we're little ones, we still are just awesome working on our harmony and all our musical skills. Third, we are going to sing 2 African American spirituals in honor of the month of February. And then last, we'll need just a tiny bit of time to get our instrumentalists ready, but we're going to perform an American folk song. And there might need to be some audience participation, okay? So just bear with us. We are so excited for that, okay? Awesome. All right, I'm going to go ahead and have my little darlings start, okay? So our first one is from the CD, Hands are at our side. Really proud of our country, ready to show what we know with nice, tall vowels. Chase and Hannah, if you would just scoot a little. Thank you. See if we can get
My country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrims ride, from every mountain side, let freedom ring.
Great job, guys. Thank you. Lovelies, we're going to do all night and swing low neck, so Miss Ricky doesn't have to bother with the CD player.
Night all day, angels watching over me, my Lord. All night, all day, angels watching over me. When I lay me down to sleep, angels watching over me, my Lord. Pray the Lord my soul to keep, angels watching over me. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home. A band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home.
Very good job. Thank you. Squeezing like this, waiting for her. Remember, we're going to hear her play 4 times before we start. Okay, Zelda, I'm just going just sing first. 1, 2, ready, go.
Pass one window, tidy-o. Pass one window, tidy-o. Pass 3 windows, tidy-o. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Jingle and jingle and jingle and Joe. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Pass one window, tidy-o. Pass 1 window, tidy-o. Pass 3 windows, tidy-o. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Jingle and jingle and jingle and Joe. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Pass 1 window, tidy-o. Pass 2 windows, tidy-o. Pass 3 windows, tidy-o. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Jingle and jingle and jingle and Joe. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Pass 1 window, tidy-o. Pass 2 windows, tidy-o. Pass 3 windows, tidy-o. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Jingle and jingle and jingle and Joe. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Pass 1 window, tidy-o. Pass 2 windows, tidy-o. Pass 3 windows, tidy-o. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Jingle and jingle and jingle and Joe. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Pass 1 window, tidy-o. Pass 2 windows, tidy-o. Pass 3 windows, tidy-o. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Jingle and jingle and jingle and Joe. Jingle at the window, tidy-o.
Friends, why don't you go back if you're not in it to your original spot, and instruments can go down. That way when you guys are ready, I'll dismiss them. Thank you. And Natalia, why don't you lead our lines out, and parents will see you in the hallway. I'll try not to jingle you.
Oh, you're great.
It's
Don't worry
fine.
about it. It's all good. Let's give another big round of applause, folks.
Leave the instruments up there, huh?
That was somebody interactive.
That was cute. That was precious. That was precious. They're going to come back and get them. Little things on the floor. That was cute. Good deal.
I think we'll move on then to approval of our minutes this evening. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes for the October 1st, 2013 work session, the January 21st, 2014 regular board meeting, and the January 29th, January 30th, 2014 special meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? None. That approval of the minutes passed. Then moving on to our approval of the agenda this evening, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Then the agenda is approved this evening. Moving on to our consent agenda items, I'm going to ask Mr. Terry Dean to talk about a change in a bar that was made today due to a request from the PED. Mr. Dean.
Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Rounds, and first of all, let me apologize to Mr. Rounds because he doesn't know this yet.
Oh, I do, actually. Thank
We
you.
received an email from the Public Education Department in regard to one of the bars that is included in your packet. It is bar number 76I. It is for Title I, which is fund number 24101. The bottom line on the bar did not change. We have inserted a new bar in your packet. However, the information that the Public Education Department did not share with us is that approximately $11,000 of that money needed to be put in the neglected and delinquent program. So instead of removing the bar and slowing down the use of those funds for the educational programs we had, we felt like it was more expeditious to actually modify the bar that is currently in your packet.
Thank you, Mr. Dean.
Double barred.
So this will still be a consent agenda item, but we have the explanation from Mr. Dean. I will move ahead and give you all of the consent agenda items this evening. We have 5A1, approval of property dispositions. 5A2, the approval of budget adjustments and increases. 5A3, approval of vendor payments. 5A4, approval of bids. And 5B1, the approval of student out-of-state travel. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Then our consent agenda items have passed this evening. That moves us on to public input. I would like to remind everyone that it is the board's practice not to respond to or take action on statements made during public input. Comments during public input will be limited to 3 minutes. And this evening, I have one public input form, Mr. Chris Nielsen. Is it Mr. or Miss? Mr. Chris.
Wow, I'm it tonight. Thank you, members of the board, Madam President, Superintendent Rounds, for allowing me to speak. I want to talk about VAM today. I'm not a statistician, full disclosure. You'll hear from one of those tonight. But I want to share with you some things that I've learned from the findings of not only the PED's own reports, but also meta-research that I've done all across the country from other experts. The executive summary on VAM tonight says that it's a method used to identify a teacher's unique contribution to student learning by effectively using, excuse me, a student's individual prior performance to form expected achievement that's compared to actual achievement. And I believe that might work if every child in New Mexico lived in a standardized environment. Same parents, same neighborhood, same income, all that stuff. But the summary also states that the VAM accounts for individual student background by using 3 years' worth of data for each individual student. So that past performance should accurately reflect or control for a student's socioeconomic status, mobility, second language proficiency, stuff like that. So 3 years of SBA scores can somehow make the effects of poverty and limited English proficiency just disappear. So all kids are statistically the same, right? Now we can just lay whatever's left on the teacher, and that's the most important part of this whole thing. So it's an incredibly long and complex set of equations and calculations. Perhaps a statistician can tell you more about the mechanics of that math, but and you'll see some graphs and stuff that'll hopefully make it easier to see. I can tell you that it won't work. Children are not machines, they're not lab rats, and they're not predictable. That's the thing. I can also tell you that several experts in VAM have stated that it's an unstable model, stable to 20% at most of teachers. It should never be used for high-stakes decisions. That was in the PED report as well. And it's biased towards more effective teachers. Los Alamos Scientists even made it into the press because they couldn't reconcile how you use a value-added model in public schools. They couldn't figure it out. They use it all the time. They just couldn't figure out how you use it with kids. So, PED claims that VAM can control for 7 things. Gender, whether you're a boy or a girl, whether you were there all year long, whether you speak English fluently, and a couple other things. But there's a bunch of other things that you can't control for with a model like this. Relationship problems, violence in the home, self-esteem, family events, drug and alcohol use, bullying, all kinds of other things like that. So as you watch the presentation tonight, think about this. And go home and do your own research and ask questions that you can Google on this thing here. This is too important just to accept based on graphs.
Superintendent Rounds, before we move to report, I believe we have some early college high school students in the audience. Is that right? Would you please
That's what I
stand?
understand. Would you all stand up for us? And Madam President, would you like them to introduce themselves?
Please.
So may we start at the front? Yes, ma'am. You're our very first.
Hi, I'm Marina Cardone, and I'm also a senior. I'm Tori Chavez, and I'm also a senior. I'm Alexis Zapian, and I'm a senior at.
Okay, we got that figured out. Yes, sir?
I'm George Sims, and I'm a freshman from Kentucky.
Hi, I'm Angelina Barra, and I'm a senior at Aero. My name is Anthony
Good. Okay, but they lied. Because they're not just seniors, they're also almost sophomores in college. Well, actually, almost juniors in college, excuse me. So there's kind of that dual thing going on, isn't there? And Madam President, we're so very proud of early college high school students. I believe birdies tell me that 3 of the ladies and gentlemen of this class will graduate with 3 associate's degrees. I think the birdies also tell me that about 48 of them will have 2, and I think the birdies also tell me that about 83% of them will have 1 associate's degree along with their high school diploma. In fact, I think, if I read the calendar right, that you all are going to get your college diploma before you get your high school degree. Am I right? Isn't that amazing?
That's pretty
I
good.
think that's pretty good. So I think we need a round of applause for these fine ladies and gentlemen. Man, we're proud of them, aren't we? Madam
move
President,
on?
may I move to the superintendent,
Please do.
something more mundane, the superintendent's report. May I first of all take just a point of personal privilege? I've been watching some texts, and I apologize. The Senate just voted on the Appropriations Act. It'll be the first vote on the Appropriations Act at the legislature this year so far. The House has been stymied, and by a vote, Dr. Sanchez, I think you're getting the same stream, 42-0, 44-0, 42-0. The Senate approved the budget with $134.744 million new dollars for public schools above the line. And I believe that is a good direction to go.
Mr. Rounds, as I was reading some of that information, it was about 6.2% increase, which is one of the largest increases we've had in quite a few years.
And certainly, Dr. Sanchez, since you and I came to this district 7 years ago, the largest increase we've seen on state funding. So that's really good news for us. The rest of the news is below the line are some additional dollars that we as a district may, in fact, I know I was talking with Patrick and others before the meeting, may be pursuing also. And so certainly, Madam President, members of the board, as an example, our K-3 Plus program, the funding was substantially increased in K-3 Plus, which is going to allow us to ramp up by about 1/3 more students this summer in this district. And that's a huge positive for us with our K through 3rd grade students in the district. So we're very delighted. It's not through the woods yet. They finish on Thursday at noon, and the House must act, and I believe I saw here they're calendaring it for tomorrow to go over to the House, so we're very hopeful that that will happen. I spent most of my weekend over there working on this, and Dr. Sanchez is going up tonight with Mr. Kinnon to finish up my work.
And Mr. Rounds, I would like to add for the board, because I know the board was very concerned about our students in high school with PE credits, graduation requirements, and Senator Cervantes and Senator Brandt, both of their bills are on the House calendar today. It looks like they will probably, I don't know if they have passed the House.
They passed the House.
They did pass the House unanimously, so they're on their way to the governor, which will reinstate what we previously had in addition to an emergency clause which takes care of things immediately for our seniors, juniors, freshmen, and sophomore.
There's also-
Senator Cervantes' bill was mind-blowing because he put in a very simple caveat, which basically says when a student enters the 9th grade, the graduation requirements that are in place when they start 9th grade stay in place until they're seniors, which is a marvelous opportunity for us not to be changing things every 2 or 3 months. So we're very, very pleased about that, and we expect the governor to sign it since the Public Education Department actually stood up in support of these bills in committee. So we don't anticipate a problem with that. So that's a real win.
And Madam President, members of the board, one other good news item, although we have a day and a half left, and I haven't figured the hours yet, but it'll be not too many left. We believe at this point that our spaceport dollars will be protected. I believe the bills that were encroaching on that have slowed down and are likely to hit a rather large pothole at a final stopping point before they get to the floor of the Senate. So we believe that we will not see an incursion into our spaceport dollars either. So we've had a fairly good weekend. But I'm sorry, we've been watching that. That's kind of an important marker for us. If I may, let me move to the first item under the superintendent's report. Madam President, members of the board, on December the 10th of 2013, this board adopted a resolution that initiated the procurement process for the design and construction of an expanded charter school campus on property owned by the district, which currently includes the Court Youth Center occupied by the Alma de Arte School and the Mesilla Valley Youth Foundation. Now, the Court Youth Center is presently leased by the district to the city of Las Cruces and then subleased to the Mesilla Valley Youth Foundation, which in turn subleases the facility to Alma de Arte Charter School. That sounds like quite an operation, doesn't it? It is. The city has informed the district that it no longer wants to maintain the lease with the district due to the concerns about liability which may arise during the contemplated construction activities, and the city intends to exercise its right to terminate the lease, which we support. In order to accommodate the city's desire to terminate this lease while maintaining the underlying sublease structure in place until such time as the district can enter into direct lease with Alma de Arte, I'm recommending that the board enter into 2 agreements this evening. They're in your action to follow. The first is a sublease recognition agreement. That'll be your first item of action that will allow the sublease to become a direct lease with the district upon termination of the lease between the city and the district, with appropriate modifications to address certain legal requirements. And then secondly, I'm going to ask that you also approve a release and termination agreement with the city that recognizes the city's termination of the lease and releases the city from any further liability with respect to these properties. Therefore, I asked for the delegated authority from the board to execute a sublease recognition agreement and a termination agreement in the forms approved by the city attorney and the school board's attorney. And so those will be represented, Madam Chair, in 2 actions under first item 4A, and then secondly under 4A1, and then secondly under 4A2. So if I may ask for 2 actions of the board, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Superintendent Rounds. Are there questions from board members before we go to action? Questions?
I move that we authorize the sublease recognition agreement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you.
And then I will also entertain a motion to authorize Superintendent Rounds to execute the release and termination agreement between the Board of Education and the City of Las Cruces regarding Court Youth Center.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? And that motion also passes.
And thank you, Mayor. May I recognize Herb Flores here, who has been working this for us as we move forward. And I know the board has been briefed on all the steps up to this point, so I know this is no surprise to the board, but for the purpose of the public, we've had several work sessions around this whole property transaction, the movement to this charter school issue, and And Mr. Torres has been our point on that. And as we move into the construction phase of that, with the bond that was passed and then a subsequent lease to build a setup that we'll be executing soon, we'll be able to bring these facilities up. And remember with me, members of the board, that'll include Alma de Arte, and then it'll also include J. Paul Taylor, who will then reside on that site. And so this is just another one of those actions moving to that point. And Madam Chair, very short superintendent's report this evening.
Thank you, Superintendent
Thank you.
Rounds. That moves us on to Human Resources Development, and in your packet, we had the Certified Classified Employee Report. Are there any questions on that report this evening? Seeing none, we will move on to the New Mexico Teach Value-Added Model presentation.
Thank you. And let me turn to Dr. Marufo, and then she'll do the introductions of that report. And Madam Chair, let me just simply state that we intend on having several runs at this with the board. This will be, I believe we're calling this NM Teach Light tonight. Okay, so let me turn Liz to you, and we'll go from
Thank you.
there.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Rounds. Today's value-added model presentation will provide you with an overview of the method that will be used in calculating a teacher's contribution to student learning in the new teacher evaluation system. Here to present the VAM information is Tim Hann, statistician from the Accountability Assessment and Research Department. Tim?
Yeah, Madam President, members of the board, I know with your public comment, let me make a caveat statement for Tim as he approaches. We're not casting value up or down on value added. What this is information for the board and our teachers, because this is the current requirement by the Public Education Department. And so this is an information share. We expect that we all need to get smart about this should it continue, and we believe at this point it's likely to. And so just want to make that caveat, Tim.
Absolutely. Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Rounds, thank you very much. When speaking about, and just to piggyback off of that, when we're talking about a value-added model, it's a couple things that I want to really be sure that we get some context on. The first is this is one data point that teachers will be evaluated on. This is not the entirety of the evaluation. There will also be teacher observations, and also, I think I can make this a little larger for you there. There will also be teacher evaluations that will come into play, as well as mixed measures. And so when we're going through the presentation tonight, it's important to keep that in consideration. The other thing to really keep in consideration is I am not employed by the PED. I am a member of the Las Cruces Public Schools community, right? I'm a Loma Heights graduate, Zia Middle School graduate, and Las Cruces High School graduate. So
Local boy done good.
Right. The perspective here is that of we need to learn this in order to be able to make some informed decisions and ask some informed questions. So that's the context from which, and I really do value the input from the public, because I think from diverse perspectives comes strength, for sure. So that's the context from which we're looking at this. So to get started, the philosophy behind a value-added model, just in general. The first thing is to identify a teacher's unique contribution to student learning using standardized based assessments. And the difference between this and No Child Left Behind is that it's a focus on scale score growth as opposed to percent proficient. We've heard a lot in the last decade or so about percent proficient. We need to get kids proficient. This takes a look at an individual student and their characteristics and what they bring to the table, and then looks for growth as opposed to just whether they're proficient or not. So in order to explore that a little bit, here's a classroom, right? Here's a classroom. We've got these labels on the kids. All right, this kid's proficient, this kid's nearing, you're beginning, this group of kids are advanced. No Child Left Behind says we need to take all these kids below the line and move them up. That's definitively No Child Left Behind, is that every student has one standard from which they will be judged, if they're proficient or not. Okay, the problem with using that as an evaluation piece is some classrooms look like this, but we live in Doña Ana County, right? So some classrooms also look like this. Maybe a few more kids that are beginning step, not quite as proficient. So this teacher has a tougher mountain to climb when it comes to proficiency than the slide before. So that's tough to really stay with the tenets of No Child Left Behind and look at it in an evaluative capacity. So, value-added model. What value-added model has to say is, are kids growing? Do we see growth individually in students from wherever they started? And have they grown at all after they've been in a teacher's classroom? And on average, did all of the students within that classroom grow, or on average, did that classroom underperform? So, that's where we get, this is where, when I talk to principals about this, because we need to understand this, because it's, like Mr. Round said, it's coming. So I asked a bunch of principals last week, is 27 a good score? And I got a lot of nods, and no, that's not proficient, so it's not a good score. But it's important to have some context when you're looking at, is 27 a good score? So let's go to context. For a 5th grade SBA reading score, a 27 is not proficient. 40 is proficient, 27 is not. So that's why principals, it's in our mind right now that 27 is a bad score. And SBA scores go from 0 to 80. So 27 is low. But let's add some more perspective to this, a little bit more context. Let's say now that in the 3rd grade, a student, their score was at 18, 4th grade at 16, so that's an average of about 17, but then in 5th grade, we're looking at a 27. That context brings about a little bit more clarity to whether 27 is per se good or not. And that's what value added, we're gonna spend a little bit of time on this slide because this is value added model. Basically, if a student scores an 18, and then the next year, so 18 as a 3rd grader, 16th as a 4th grader, we would expect with 1 year's worth of growth, that they'd be at about an 18 or a 17 the next year. That would be 1 year's worth of growth. Anything beyond that is overperforming. Anything below that is underperforming. So as you can see, this student, 18 and 16, but then went to a 27, they're performing more than we would have expected based upon their history as a student. So, let's take a look at that. So that's where value added comes in. Value added, and we've got this here, so that we can, is this really, we'll refer back to this a few times. Got a good view.
Herb, you got the best view in
Yes,
town.
for sure.
there, buddy.
But so in words, here's the chart for it. But in words, value-added model, it's a way to take a student's prior performance, and then based on their prior performance, you generate an expected performance, and then compare that performance to how they actually perform after they've been in that teacher's classroom. So, once again, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. So the expected performance, if we take an average of these 2 years, that's an average performance of 17. That's what we would expect them to perform at within 5th grade. And then we can compare how they actually perform to what we would expect. I'm going to try to say that several times throughout the night because it took a while for it to get into my head for sure. So the next piece, here's the math, value-added score. Actual scale score minus expected scale score. All right here. Average of 17 to 27, so the difference between 27 and 17 is 10. So there was a scale score growth of 10 within this student, which is very good for this particular student.
Now, Madam President, members of the board, those 2 gentlemen are going to leave not because they don't like Dr. Hand's presentation. It's because they have about a 4-hour trip up to Santa Fe tonight, and I told them that we would release them and let them go. So if y'all don't mind, don't get a ticket.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rounds, Madam President, members of the board. We'll see you when we get back.
They have a little work to do for the next day and a half for us.
And this is only the 3rd time Dr. Sanchez has seen this as well. So. Good.
And every time I see it, I learn something new.
More, that's right.
Math is beautiful, Dr. Sanchez. It's a beautiful thing.
Math is for sure.
So, and my big concern, and what I think should be the concern of educators and the community and boards of education and teachers and proponents of education is the equity piece behind this. And you can either guess about it, or you can do the math, and you can go through and you can look, is this equitable for students? And specifically in New Mexico, when we've gone, and I'll show you some charts in a bit, when you use, and I know there are counter arguments to this, but there's counter arguments to eating bacon as well. So using only prior performance accounts for differences in student background. A bit. Teachers teaching every level of student have an equal opportunity to be successful. We're going to look, and when we talk about hitting this multiple times, this is the 5,000-foot view. There's math behind each of these statements that we'll get into. I want to chip away at this because it's a lot. It's a lot to hit. And teachers are not advantaged or disadvantaged by having certain types of students in their classrooms, for sure. So I was at New Mexico State not long ago, and one of our learning outcomes was to appreciate the beauty of mathematics. That was one of the learning outcomes. So I'd like to just take a moment.
That warms my heart. Oh, my goodness. It's beautiful.
Just soak it in a little bit. This is...
You know, they have a psychological test that looks like that, too.
Yes, they do.
Rorschach or something
Absolutely.
like that.
But basically, what we have done as a state is we have taken a look at different populations of students, different levels of proficiency on scores, different situations that students come to the table with, and we're looking to see if it's equitable for those students. We can get into depth with each of these as we chip away at this process. But once again, it's just beautiful, for sure, for most of us. Some of us. Okay, for me. Beautiful for me. Okay, now, we're starting to get into the weeds here a little bit, but I think it's important to take a look. So we will get a little closer here. So now let's take a look. We've got these kids, and they've shown some growth, or they've shown that they have underperformed. And basically, if you look from the far left here, I don't know if you guys can see whenever I point to this on your monitors there, but we've got ineffective teaching, minimally effective teaching, highly effective teaching, and exemplary teaching across the bottom. So, once again, we're going to go back to here. Expected and actual. The blue bar in this chart is a third grade math score. So we're at about 20 for this student. The red bar is when you average the third and fourth grade score, you come up with an expected score. So because they've scored right about there for third and fourth grade, we would expect them to be at about a 25. The green bar is how this class of students actually performed. And we're not talking about one student here. We're not talking about a student that underperformed. We're talking about, on average, this entire class of students underperformed substantially by about 15 points. Okay? And then the reverse holds true over on this side. If you take a look at the, here's the third grade math, the average of third and fourth, which leaves us an expected score, and then these students far outperformed what we would have expected based on their history. And the best indicator of future performance is prior performance. That's why we have history classes and those types of things. So this here,
Question.
yes, sir.
These are the schools in New Mexico?
These are, yes, sir.
Not our own population?
These are school, and there's a lot of talk when you talk about VAMB about floor effects and ceiling effects. Like if you have students that are low on their achievement, these are the bottom 25% of schools in New Mexico. So this is actual data from schools in New Mexico of the bottom 25% of schools in terms of percent proficient. So, and I ran the data on PED has released 5th, 6th, and some of 8th for our district. And I ran the data on our district just on that one population of students, and the distribution was exactly the same. And as we get a little further into the conversation, we can talk about how much growth is good growth and how many people are within each of these ranges. We'll get closer on that. So that's that piece. Oh, here we go again. Beauty, right?
Math is beautiful.
Math is beautiful. And I'm not kidding you. One of the learning outcomes that we had to justify at NMSU was an appreciation for the beauty of math. Try to quantify that sometime. That was tough. So we've got all these scores now. We've got these classes of students that have either gained and overperformed or underperformed or are right about where we expected them. but we can't really make comparisons until we make it into a normal distribution. And this is where if you guys have iPods or something, you want to watch YouTube. If you're not, this is where we lose some people. But this is where I really love. So a bell curve. We've heard about a bell curve. This is where we need just a little bit of background on this. Basically, if we were to look at scores, and I don't know if you can see this, but let's say that we went from 0 to 80 on the SBA scale. Very few students would score around 0. Very few students would score around 80. Most people fall right in the middle. That's the basic statistical model of a bell curve. So what is called a z-score is what we're going to be looking at very shortly as to what the value-added model score is going to be for each of the teachers. And so here's all you need to know. 0 means it's right about what you expected. So right about what you've expected, and then the further you get from 0 to about 3 out here, this is much more than you would have expected, and to -3 over here is much less than you would have expected. So we have to normalize the data in order to make comparisons across year, across subject, and across assessment. That's as deep as I'm going to go, for sure. And like I say, we're going to keep digging into this, but this is just a little bit of background information that we're going to have. So,
Show a normalization curve. Oh, you're not going to go there? Are you going to show the normalization curve?
here it is. Here it comes. Can you wait? I mean, can you hardly wait
I
to
can
see
hardly
this?
wait. I'm on the edge of my
it's-
seat. I'm about to jump off.
So when you take all of these VAM scores, for anytime you get about more than 30 of something, it follows a normal distribution. So now that we have this value-added score, as you can see, like we talked about, this score of 0 here means that the students, we're going to go right back to here, that means it was an 18, a 16, and then a 17, right? We thought they were 18 in third grade, 16 in fourth grade, and then 17 in fifth grade. That means that they're right as expected, right what we were looking for the student to do. Now, if a student goes 18, 16, 27, which is 10 scale score points, that's actually further over here onto the chart up in this area. And as you can see, we go from exemplary. There's just a few teachers here in exemplary, a few more in highly effective, a big chunk. Can you see how many more people? Big chunk in effective that just continued along the trend that we would expect, and then it mirrors down here to minimally effective and ineffective. Next slide. Okay. I almost want to open it to questions at this point, and then we can move on, because I want to make sure that we're close before we get to this next slide.
Remember, this is New Mexico Teach Light. We're going to have other sessions, so we're trying to peel the onion on this so the board can become aware of all the parts.
So questions
Does
to
anyone
this
have
point.
questions?
Keep it light.
Keep it light. For sure. For sure. And I asked earlier, I was like, should I just stop now? Should I just stop it at this point? But we're a little bit closer. So here's the light version. Here's the light version here. All of this that we've said leads to this slide. So basically, when all of this is said and done, and teachers have taught, and we've got scores, and we go through and we do the math, we're going to end up with what are called VAM scores, value-added model scores. And as you can see in this slide, right up here, a score of 2.2, if you remember the curve, scores around 0 indicate that teachers are approximately meeting expectations. The further the scores move from 0, the more teachers are exceeding expectation. And the further scores move below 0, the more teachers are not meeting expectations, which is a statistical, meeting is actually a statistical, it's really deep. We're going to skip that part.
Actually, that's the Ed not being able to spell the term meeting.
Yes. Yeah, this is a screenshot for sure.
Screenshot from there.
But, so as you can see, 2.2, 2.1, this teacher is, the students in this teacher's classroom are consistently overperforming based on their history. So you have a history of scores for these students, but in this teacher's classroom, they're consistently overperforming based on the student's history, which gives them a total VAM score of 2.2, which gives them 69 points out of 70. Now, it's important, there's 200 points total within a teacher's evaluation. This 70 points here makes up this percentage, this portion of that teacher's evaluation. It's a mouthful, for sure. But this is what we're going to end up with. We're going to end up with VAM scores from 0 to about 3 and from 0 to about -3. Okay? So I thought it might be fun to take a look at some actual Las Cruces Public Schools data. Fun is subjective. For sure. So
I
let's...
like math.
Yeah.
Fun.
So here we have, when I went in and I pulled, they have calculated VAM scores for 5th, 6th, and some 8th grade classrooms and teachers. And so this is, and I also thought it might be fun to leave the teacher names off, for sure. I think we're going to just look at the numbers, for sure. Yeah. So right up here, we have these 35 points and 70 points, if a teacher only has 2 years worth of data, their observation is going to count more than their student achievement piece. So that's why they have a smaller amount of possible points than, say, this teacher who has 70. They have a full 3 years worth of data here. And as you can see, a lot of these teachers who are lower in their VAM scores only have a couple years worth of data, which says maybe they're new teachers. Maybe they're just getting the hang of things. But you can see some trends here. For this particular teacher, the students within their classroom came in with scores and left that classroom with scores much lower than they came in with. Not one student, but the average of all students within there. And then you always do the tough one first, and then we'll go back and we'll look at some of our higher scores. So this, I just took the top 8 or so, and you can see here that there's some trends here. That within these classrooms, consistently, this teacher's student, year after year, their students as a group overperform when compared to what their scores were. And you can see that translates, and it's a really cool cumulative density function that does it, right? That translates from the 69.89 out of 70 points possible, 34.52 out of 35. This is where we're headed, is having scores for each year, for each subject, for teachers over the years that show, and this is one more time through, how did they perform this is after being in your class for a year, how did they perform compared to how they performed in the past? That's the easiest I can sum it up into the value-added model. And the last piece is how this is going to work, and we're still getting clarification on a lot of this. This is what we have now. This is what I have been able to gather from the PED, process through. If you really want a nap, watch the webinars that I had to watch in order to get through this, to figure this out. But we now know that a first-year teacher, like we had said, they're not going to have a lot of data backing up where their kids have been. So that will go more toward their observations. And then once you get to the third year, it'll be 25% observation, 25% multiple measures, and 50% student achievement. That's VAM Light.
You'll also notice, Madam President, members of the board, that kindergarten teachers, because of the nature of their students, because they don't bring any prior scores with them, any prior practice, 75% of their evaluation is an observation, and none of it is on student achievement. Please note that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's VAM, well, let's not even say light, like medium light, like kind of a medium light, for sure. But I tried to, here was my objective in going through this, to give you enough information to maybe start thinking about some questions, to know enough so that next time we hit it, you'll have some perspective on what we need to know, what we need to really find out about this. And I think it's important for us as a district to be well armed with understanding this before it shows up at our doorstep for sure.
Madam President, we'd be happy to answer questions. We also would like to recommend to the board that we take this up for a second time with the board so you can become more knowledgeable at a retreat, so we can spend more time. This is sort of your first pass through. As Stephen said before he left, he's been through the presentation 3 times. He's a math stats guy. I am too, and every time we go through this with Tim, we learn more of the complexities, as you said, of the parts that are all moving about in this, so we can begin to develop a good understanding of what the implications are and what the parts are. So just thought we might recommend that to you.
Thank you. Are there questions from board members? Dr. Votaw.
Madam Chair, Mr. Rounds. Mr. Hant, I have a couple of questions. And
Yes, ma'am.
in some previous incarnation, because I am pretty old, we used to believe that we didn't get good measurements of young children. So when I see this kindergarten, first, second, third, I'm just thinking, oh,
The tool better be right.
are we better now than we used to be at measuring 6-year-olds?
I could get 6 people lined up that said one way and 6 that said the other, for sure. And I think, yes.
And Madam President, one of the things that
Yes.
we would also say to you is that we've asked Tim to spend some time with our data triangulation work we've done with multiple tests and see if, as we run the normalization work, if it has predictability in that, which would then lead me to believe the answer to your question is a better yes than you've heard.
Right.
And we haven't completed all of that work, but I think that's going to be part of the discussion about is the tool set we have giving us reasonable data. From a statistical standpoint, as you know, Madam President, the answer is yes, but when you get to reliability, that's a little bit different question that you're asking. And so,
Yes, ma'am.
And so then my other question is about the probably 50% of the teachers in the district, well, not that many. So probably 25% of the teachers in the district who teach not math, not language arts.
Right.
Not science.
Absolutely.
And not social studies. So I'm this music teacher we had here tonight.
Right.
Who did a pretty good job. How is she going to get a value-added score?
There's 2 ways to approach this. The first is how the PED has it set up, and then we can have philosophical conversations about how it should happen. You know, and you guys just settle in, get some pillows. It could take a while, but the way the PED has it set up is the value. Everything we've looked at tonight is SBA, and what they will do is they will be able to, if you can, connect the SBA to their subject matter, it will work exactly like this. If you can't, then EOCs come into play, discovery scores come into play, and I've talked with principals. We'll go philosophical for like 15 seconds. Some principals say we're all in the business of literacy. Every teacher is working to get our kids literate, and so we should all be based on the same standard. The way things are set up right now, EOCs are content specific in high school. K through 8, reading and math, I think you can tie to pretty much all teachers. And then the discovery scores, we also have discovery assessments that are content specific. And it's going to get murky, but it's starting to clear up. As we get more information from PED, it's getting clearer, but it certainly is understandable that there is going to be a music teacher that we have to talk about. How are we going to know how either that they added to the literacy of their classroom, or is there an end of course exam that can see growth within that group of students? And that's the way it's set up presently.
Or can the children sing?
Right. Yeah, can you assess that? Is that an assessment that we can take a look
I
at?
can assess.
It sounded good to me.
right, and Madam President, Dr. Votaw, that is the essence of the difficulty within the system.
Yes.
To an extent. It's some of the questions you've asked. Again, we're not passing judgment on the system. We're trying to get smart about it, understand its moving parts. One of the issues here that we may want to continue contemplating, should this model stay, is in multiple measures, and it may be a way of us locally figuring out a way to define some of these other moving parts around things we see as appropriate for that. And I think what you just heard is a good example of that question, is if you could define what can the kids sing, if you could answer that question, that could be not in the student achievement data that the state requires you to use, but could conceivably be in other measures, multiple measures that you would ascertain at a local level to help mediate how the scoring goes. And we are still getting smarter on the state's system and expectations, and, hang with us. We can't tell you today with certainty, and that's why Tim and others are spending a fair amount of time trying to get our arms around this, so we can, if this in fact stays as a system, so we can manage it appropriately and make good decisions about staff.
And yeah, as I've lived with this for the last week or so, my line of thought is going directly down where yours is are there specific scenarios where this isn't equitable or unfair? We certainly need to explore that.
And Madam President, the good news is that we have the observations side as what I said to the board and others for this year in particular is where we're going to put all of our marbles, because we do know what that is. When you go in a classroom, watch a teacher teach in their art, you can in fact be pretty prescriptive about where that is on certain margins. And so that's where we are today. And I think through time, we may want to contemplate that different ways. But today, we don't have good answers for you.
Mr. Davis.
My concern is the testing. Is it next year that the park comes in? And what do we, how does that fit in?
Yes, sir.
Comparing the park to the SBA, and the other one that concerns me is some are going to be rated on the EOC.
Right.
Which are not finished.
Right.
And so for those teachers who have to use the EOC because they aren't on the SBA.
Fantastic
We're
question.
going to wait 3 years before we say anything about them, right?
No, because the value of normalization, when you have data, the value of doing a z-score within this -5 to 5, instead of looking at just scale scores for SBA, once you normalize that data and look at the distance from the mean on scores and turn it into one standard deviation from the mean, 1.5. Once you standardize it, then you can make comparisons across grade level, across subject matter, and across assessments.
Well, that was my point. I mean, we really haven't settled down on the EOCs, what they are.
Right.
I mean, we were talking about how you're going to do it with the band, how you're going to do it with the PE people there. So we're going to have to wait for 3 years till they decide how we're going to have an EOC with them to see whether they. I'm having a little problem with the whole thing, actually.
The support structure for the entire model is good, authentic assessment. No question.
Mathematically, maybe super.
Yes.
But really, what it's doing is what concerns me.
Right.
And the way the park comes in, I understand that's a whole different ballgame about what the kids are going to do it. There's some question about when they go to the park, they're going to be using computers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to become a function, I guess, somewhat, of
No
the
question.
child's ability to work with a computer. And I don't know if we're doing anything about that or not.
That's
I'm
a
really
critical learning
a
outcome.
little hesitant to jump in the middle of this rating system without having vetted everything out, so that's.
Yes, sir. I'm with you.
But, I mean, we're gonna have to look at what we're gonna do when the park shows up. I know you don't have an answer tonight, but something we have to discuss and look at there.
Right.
So, and instead of using the, what's the one they're using now, the.
NMSBI?
No, the one,
Scale score.
go back to the old system of,
Red scores.
yeah,
Scale
so.
scores. So I want to just go back, one thing that Tim said. As we move through testing protocols, I'm not as concerned as I was because of the normalization process that is being contemplated in this. It seems to do some modification as far as how people are doing in relationship to what is expected. It is a bit of a slippery slope because of the park protocols are requiring a different level of instruction in some things that we haven't normally done as our classroom procedure. And as we go through time, that's going to be part of the, I mean, to your point, Mr. Davis and Madam President, is part of the challenge we have. And again, as we move through other iterations of our discussions, I would hope we would continue to burrow into some of these issues.
No question.
We want to be fair and equitable using a system that may be required of us to use, and we just are trying to get our arms around it to figure out how do you make it work best. What does it do as far as PD? I'm going to take one little tangent is all. So let's suppose for a minute you have a teacher who is performing below that 0 point by 1 standard deviation or more. Just for a minute, let's just take that group. Then the challenge that Dr. Marufo has in her new role in HRD is how do you define what those weaknesses are, and then what is the professional development that you thrust into that to change that practice in the classroom so they have the skill set they need to have to do that. And that's the first step that you have to take. And so as we move into Park and the complexities that's developing, it really is challenging, and why we did what we did with HRD as we begin to see this coming on to us, because it is really about developing proper PD as a first step. It isn't a teacher termination first step, I guess the first thing I'm saying. Instead, it's how do you help modify the instructions so that if you're more than certain 1.5 deviations out, 2, Tim, I guess it is. 2 is it. So after you're 2 standard deviations out in that set of teachers, how do you move them back towards 0? So that they can be effective teachers, and before you get to decisions of employment and things like that. And that's squarely going to be on her shoulders, Dr. Sanchez's shoulders, as we work at those instructional packages and how we interpret those to teachers. So we have a lot of unknowns right now.
And how are you feeding this information back to the universities?
Well, that's a whole nother discussion, Madam President, Mr. Davis, and certainly what will happen is that should we continue the course of Common Core, and I believe we will in New Mexico for the foreseeable future, we will have to develop a system both at the beginning point at the universities and at the structural points as an employer, as an educational institution to really answer that question of how do you move teachers into a practice that aligns with the expectations. That's always been the case, by the way. We just have a different set of ways we're measuring that. There's more science to it, less on observation and more on some performance issues here. And I'm not sure the balance is right. I'll be very candid. I have been candid with the board about that. But nonetheless, it's the system we have. And so we hope to move through that. And I think it has tremendous implications to us as we move over the next 2 or 3 years and move toward Park. But from a strictly statistical standpoint, whether it's Park, Discovery, NMSBA, just to name 3, when you normalize data and you lay those data sets over the top, correct me, Tim, if I'm wrong,
Right.
you lay those data sets over the top of each other, it becomes highly predictable. In other words, they look very much the same, with the same teachers falling in certain margins as you begin to get a normalization. So that gives me some optimism that we'll be able to approach even the effective Park. And Tim, am I on point with you?
The Z-scores were invented to be able to compare numbers on different scales. So if you have a different scale or different scores in 2011 are different than scores in 2009. So you have to normalize that distribution in order to make the comparison.
Anyway,
Well, we're going to have another.
we're going to have several sessions if you need
Okay.
them.
Phase 2 upcoming.
This is light, medium light.
Mr. Hand, I would like to thank you very much for presenting this.
Are
Are you finished?
I am finished when you tell me I'm finished.
Okay.
That's a great idea.
I feel good.
Was there more?
I want
Is
some
there
more.
No, that was the last slide.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. We're good.
Okay.
So we're
I-
good. Thank you.
I wanted to say I agree with you. Math is beautiful.
Yes, thank you.
So
Yes, it is.
I think it's really important for the board to understand the system that they're trying to use so that we can understand what's happening. And I appreciate that you gave us the link to the PED. I did go and look at the PED's presentation for that, and I think you did a great job of making it light and presenting it here for us.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Tim, thanks, very good job. See, math even gets applause. See how beautiful it is?
That moves us on then to turnaround initiatives, and this evening, I believe we do not have a turnaround initiatives presentation, a report.
Yes.
So we'll move on to other reports. Finance, Mr. Dean, I believe we have an audit report.
Madam President, members of the board, let me introduce you to Amy Carter. She is a senior assurance supervisor, or I probably messed the title up, with Moss Adams. Moss Adams is our auditing firm. This is the third year that they have done our audit, and they really do a very good job. For example, I think it's probably one of the only audit firms in New Mexico that actually read the rules from the state auditor. That is why our format of our audit report, and I know we sent it to you electronically, is slightly different as it was in previous years. The state auditor changed the rules, but Moss Adams, I think, is probably the only firm that caught that. So I'll turn it over to Amy Carter.
Thank you. I do have to kind of tell you, I'm losing my voice, and I'm actually surprised that I have the voice I have now, because an hour ago, there was nothing. So I'm going to try. I'm going to try to, of course, speed through this just because of my voice. But of course, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I did want to expand a little about what Terry was saying. Actually, the state auditor is changing the rule now. We actually were following the clarity standards from the AICPA, and the state auditor didn't even have it right. So Terry is correct when he says that, and I do believe this because I have talked to the state auditor's office, that Las Cruces Public Schools is the only district in New Mexico that actually have presented their financial statements correctly for June 30, 2013.
Probably, good job.
Probably the best picture of how the audit went is if you would turn to page 95. Do you guys have hard copies?
We
Oh, you
don't.
don't? Okay,
You
that's
can't
okay.
turn to any page on a PDF.
Page 95 is actually, it's the schedule of findings and question cost. And in that schedule, it basically depicts what the type of auditor's report was that was issued, and that, again, for the past 3 years that we've done the audit, is a clean opinion. This year, it is actually labeled as an unmodified opinion rather than an unqualified. Again, that's just the change of the wording and the standards. Still the same thing, but it is a clean opinion. We had no material weaknesses this year, and that includes the charter schools as well that are also reported with your financials. The district had 7 findings in total. 3 of those findings were repeat findings, and 3 were federal findings. And then the other 4 were more of compliance issues. La Academia Dolores Huerta had no findings this year, which is a very good thing. Las Montanas actually only had 2 findings, which is a significant improvement for that charter school as well. I don't know if you guys wanted me to go through the findings.
You might just give a brief on.
Sure. So of course, the first finding is related to IT general controls. This is one that we have been, we've had, the first year we did the audit, we had several bullet points that we had issues with. And now we're down to 3, which is very good progress for the district. And I believe you guys are still working on trying to work on those. The next one is regarding procurement. This, again, as well as the IT general control, please keep in mind that these are, the only reason they're findings is not because they're significant deficiencies. They're basically just compliance findings, which no finding is a good finding. But if you had to have a finding, this is the type of finding you would want to have, would be just a non-compliance in accordance with the New Mexico State Audit Rule. The next one is late fees. And of course, you can see the dollar amount. Have you put that? $39, really? But unfortunately, due to state audit rule, even if we find something that is $1 out of compliance, we still have to write a finding. So again, this is just regarding to some late fees that were paid with some gas cards.
That's out of about $189 million.
Yeah, exactly. The second one is unallowable cost. This one was a little interesting, but it was basically for using federal money to purchase trophies. And so the district was unaware that federal money could not be used to buy trophies. And again, you can see the dollar amount there, $40 was all we found. Next are the findings for Las Montanas. That's actually a part of the other finding that we just talked about.
There we go.
This is just some cash control standards. This is quite an improvement because previously it was the entire school that we had some cash control issues, and now we're just whittling it down just to the activities fund. And quite honestly, that's common in a lot of school districts, is to have some issues with the activities funds. And then the next one was over just budget report compliance. And interestingly enough, some of this has to do with the cash report, which there are several districts in the state that also have an issue with the cash report that is actually being modified as we speak. So then section 3 are the federal award findings. This one is in regard to time and effort reports. It has been a finding for a couple of years, but we have seen the district drastically improve this, and it just seems like we just find that isolated instance this year, and so I do hope that this will be gone next year. The next one is regarding child nutrition, and there are some requirements in this federal program about the particular language that is supposed to be written in the contracts with the food services, with the nutrition contracts. And there was just some language that was missing regarding the cost reimbursable specific language. And so, of course, it was a finding as well. And then the next one is Head Start. Head Start is actually federal awards that are provided to the district without having the PED mediation in between. So they're labeled as direct awards. And any time you have a direct award, there is some particular compliance reporting that is required. The district has very few federal direct awards, and therefore they were just didn't realize that it needed to be done. And that's all the findings. Did anyone have any questions?
Do board members have questions? Thank you so much.
Okay.
I did want to mention that Mr. Davis has now taken Dr. Botha's place on the audit committee, so he is now the other board member. He and I will be on that audit committee, and we did have a chance to look over these, and thank you very much.
And as always, the finance department here has just always been wonderful to work with. They're very responsive and have always had really positive attitudes anytime we come in and have questions, and very knowledgeable. I think you've got a great team, Terry.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Rounds, Madam President, if I may, and thank you, Amy, for your presentation. I do want to compliment the team in the Finance Department. I get to drink coffee and go to meetings. It's those guys that do the work led by Crystal Valdez, our controller. They do a great job. We really have a very good team. I would say that we have the best team in the state of New Mexico.
I would agree.
One of the things that Ms. Carter mentioned was the lack of consistency statewide on the cash report. I've been on a task force with New Mexico ASBO working on modifying that cash report, of which Amy has contributed to that as well. And actually, we'll be rolling that report out at the winter conference, which is this week in Albuquerque for New Mexico ASBO.
And Madam President, that's a very humble statement by the best CFO in the state of New Mexico, so thank you for that. And Amy, this particular audit firm is second to none. I've been through audits for 31 years now as a superintendent, and the level of complexity of today's world and the ability to stay current and correct on your methodology is remarkably good. Especially right now. The federal stuff is just bopping about and the state stuff's bopping about. And so you've stayed on top of all of that and helped us out. But you see here, we got caught on one little compliance issue because things moved around in business we don't normally do, and you make inadvertent mistakes. Notice there was no money in the issue. It's a procedural problem that was in place. And so I'm very proud of the team, and Terry's very, very humble. I've had lots of CFOs in my career, and he's the very, very best we've had. So congratulations to both of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Dean, I believe you have second quarterly reports for us?
Madam President, included in members of the board, Mr. Rounds, included in your packet tonight are the reports for the quarterly reports for the district as well as our two charters. Looking at the report for the Las Cruces Public Schools, to date, or as of December 31st, the district has received approximately $129 million. We've spent $120 million of that. We currently have or as of December 31st, we had a cash balance of $30,000 in the operational fund. Now, if you remember that our cash balance builds, and in June, when we liquidate all the summer payroll, then that cash balance drops. At this time, we anticipate somewhere in the neighborhood of a $5 to $6 million decrease in our operational cash balance at the end of the year. We expected that because of the insurance that we postponed, the risk insurance that we postponed from 1 year to the next. But we do anticipate a decrease of our operational cash balance of about $5 to $6 million is my estimate at this time. Mr. Rounds and I will continue to monitor that and report to that to you as we continue working on the budget. Total cash balance as of the end of December 31st was approximately $72 million. A couple of items that I do want to point out included in the report in the 13,000 fund, which is transportation. As of December 31st, we were reflecting a deficit position of $960,000. We know that amount is the amount that we've been underfunded for the transportation. In June, as we close out that fund and we finalize all of those transportation costs, then we will transfer that cost to the operational fund. I believe that there's one more point a couple more points I needed to bring out. In Fund 24109, Idea B is in a deficit position, as well as Fund 24115, which is Idea B private school and Title II. All of those programs are awaiting the carryover bars, which were in your packet tonight, that were approved. So with tonight's action, all of those deficits have been eliminated. That concludes the report for the Las Cruces schools, and I stand for questions.
Are there questions?
Madam President, moving on to La Academia de Lourdes Huerta, their report is fairly boring. There is nothing even remarkable to note on the bottom as funds being overbalanced. They did reflect revenue of $712,000, and I'm rounding these, with $693,000 of corresponding expenditures. I have no comments and really about that other than that. The report appears to be correct.
Are there any questions from board members?
If you have no comments, we have no comments.
Also included in your packet is a report from Las Montañas Charter High School as well. The report appears to be correct. They reflect total revenue of approximately $1.2 million and $1.1 million of expenditures for the same period. There is one note, is Fund 23,000, which is non-instructional student support, an activity account that Ms. Carter mentioned, that it was reflecting in the red. There was a bar that their board approved, their governance council approved, that corrected this issue. So I believe that corrects the issue with the audit finding as well as this deficit position. And I stand for questions.
Any questions from board members?
Oh, that's good news.
And thank you to the charter folks that came to be in the audience in case there were questions. That will move us on then to instruction. And in your packet, we had the Head Start meal report. If there are any questions or comments?
It's in the record.
Okay, then we'll move on to operations. And we also had our construction projects report in the packet this evening.
Madam President, if I could, I'd like Gloria to give you just one heads up, and it has to do with the Las Cruces High School project and the issue of closure of El Paseo.
Madam President, members of board, Superintendent Rounds, concerning the bridge, we are going to start putting the structural steel up in May, and this is going to go over a weekend, so the closure will happen over a weekend on El Paseo. Other than that, we're going to have periodic closures of the road, just one lane, and that's going to be during the summer, and that's to put on the roof, to put on the glass, and to the exterior walls of the bridge. So that'll go on during the summer. But we won't have another entire closure of El Paseo other than the steel closure in May. But I'll give you plenty of heads up before that happens.
We just want to let you know that there will be a closure of El Paseo. It'll be in the latter part of May. And I think we had noted that to you as we looked at the model. They're going to construct a portion of that and overnight on the weekend do a lift and in place of that, which will require a temporary closure of the whole road. And then after that, they'll have some substructure work. It'll just take certain lanes offline as also very little interruption, which is
Correct.
very good.
Do we have a plan to make sure the public knows it in the paper or something?
We do have a PR plan that Ms. Cabana is working on. This is part of ours also, is to begin letting you be aware, and through our TV transmission, begin to notify the public of what's coming several months from now.
Thank you.
So it'll be in the newspaper?
It'll be in the newspaper, and we'll do a notification.
website.
We'll do a radio, we'll do a website notice and some things like that as we go in. Yes, sir.
Thank you. And are there any other questions on the constructions report? No? Thank you. That moves us then to board items, old business. We have a report on our January 28th, 2014 closed session. The board met in closed session from 5:03 PM to 7:35 PM to discuss limited personnel matters relating to the mid-year evaluation of the superintendent. No other matters were discussed and no action was taken. That will move us to the action on the superintendent's employment contract. And I will entertain a motion, if you will recall, that we have to terminate the current contract and then vote on a new one. So I will entertain a motion to terminate Superintendent Brown's current employment contract effective June 30th, 2014.
So moved.
And this will be a roll call.
Question.
Yes?
Do we have to hear from him first, or?
I think he's going to speak after. Would you like to
Madam
speak
President,
now?
after you move to your action on contract, I'd love to make the comment at that time. Thank you.
I'll second the motion then.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Mr. Davis, will you please take roll call? Roll call vote.
Oh, roll call vote? Oh, okay. Ms. Hall? Aye. Dr. Voto?
Aye.
I vote aye, Madam Chair.
I vote aye, and we have now terminated Superintendent Brown's
See you guys.
contract.
Aren't you supposed to accept it?
No, not yet, when you come back and accept.
I will quickly move to entertain a motion to offer Superintendent Rounds a new 2-year employment contract beginning July 1st, 2014, and ending June 30th, 2016, on the same terms and conditions as the current contract, but subject to such salary and benefit adjustments as may be negotiated by the superintendent and the board prior to July 1st, 2014, upon approval of the 2014-2015 budget.
So moved.
Second.
And please take roll call.
Again? Okay. Ms. Hall? Dr. Voto?
Aye.
I vote aye, Madam Chair.
I vote aye. Congratulations, Superintendent Rounds.
Whew, I was packing a box out here. Madam President, first of all, I want to thank the board very much for, I think, a really good dialogue we had with the mid-year evaluation. I'm honored to continue working with this board, and I've said that, I think, many times publicly. You're uniquely wonderful as a group of people as you care about our students. I'm honored to serve as superintendent of this district, and I accept your offer to continue my service with the district. I really feel blessed, and those of you left in the audience that I'm able to work with in the community and as part of the staff, I simply want to say to you how thankful I am to have such a quality, high-purposed group of professionals that we work with. And this board is uniquely wonderful. We have a lot of tough things we have to look at. And I know that you're always, everybody in this room, looking at the kids first and making sure we do what's right. And I'm just honored to be part of that kind of an operation. So thank you so much for the continued opportunity.
And that moves us on to the next item, the 2014 NMSBA Excellence for Student Achievement Award. In your package, you'll find copies of some of the nominations that we have received. I'm going to remind you that we will vote on this in March at our regular board meeting. So we do still have some time. There could be some more that come in, and I'd like each of the board members to think through whether there's somebody you'd like to nominate. And we'll make sure before the March meeting that we have all the nominations together and that we are ready to vote on that. Are there any questions on that?
It's good to have more than one
It is.
candidate.
It is. Then that moves us to new business. We have the first reading of policy DIF, the operational cash balance. Mr. Dean.
Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Rounds, included in your packet tonight is a proposed policy. This is in regard to the cash balance within the operational fund. Currently, we do not have a policy in place, nor is there one required from regulation nor statute. However, every time that Mr. Rounds and I go to and have a bond rating presentation, they always ask us about our cash reserve, cash balance policy. We always have to say, that we do not have one. Many school districts around the state are adopting cash balance, cash reserve policies. And I believe that it would be in the best interest of the districts to do the same. The proposed policy that is in front of you has been reviewed by the Finance Committee, and that's why we're bringing it to the full board at this time. Our neighbors to the south have adopted a policy that is similar to this. They have a 10%. What they're saying is their cash reserves will be 10% of their SEG, the amount that they receive in SEG. The policy that we're proposing starts at 5. Starts at 5% of our SEG. This is the same policy. Basically, we plagiarized this policy from the Santa Fe Public Schools. So it's the same policy that is in place in the Santa Fe Public Schools, that it's 5% of the revenue within the operational fund, which is basically SEG, the major components are SEG and the local tax that comes into the operational fund. If it goes over 7.5%, then using the excess for non-recurring expenses. That's the proposed policy. I stand for questions.
I'd like to ask a question. My first thought when I looked at it was I didn't know why we were putting in place. I appreciate your explanation about why it might be important to have it. My second question was why 5% to 7.5%? Can you give me an idea why we'd put an upper cap like that?
Quite frankly, the money that we bring in needs to be used to educate our students, okay? And now this is more my philosophy. I have not talked to Mr. Rounds about this. The reason that there is a cap is really to put that money to use for the education of the students and not hoarding money. Because it doesn't do our students any good to hoard money. Other business managers, if they heard me say that, they would probably be renting their clothing and rolling themselves in ashes. But but there's no point of hoarding money when it needs to be pointed to the mission.
And I understand that, and that's what I thought would probably be your answer, but can you tell me why you came up with the 7.5? Is that just a number that you felt?
I felt like it was more palatable. It's identical to what they put in the policy in Santa Fe, and I was piggybacking off of what they have done. The board can set that number at any number you desire.
Madam President, there is a note in the policy there that's parenthetical that indicates an amount that equates to 1 month's salary and benefits for all employees, whichever is higher. And from a fiscal control standpoint, quite often in private business, you want to have a certain amount of operating reserve, so to speak, and this approximates that. If you go back to Santa Fe, the reason it's there, I was public school finance chief a year that Santa Fe ran out of cash. Literally ran out of cash in April. And they didn't have enough reserves to even make their summer payrolls, much less the payrolls of the year. And so this was an issue that actually, Terry, we never talked, actually I recommended be a policy point for public schools, just as a management parameter. Now, understand as a board, if there was some consequence coming forward where there was going to be a large cost we would have to absorb early in a fiscal year, we would come before you and precede and ask you to hold more than the 7.5% and waive your policy to get
And I did notice that was in there, that statement was in there, and I wondered whether, so you are going to have to come before the board if we need to hold more than that.
If you wanted to go, if we needed to go to more than that.
Because we're putting it in policy, then anytime we would want to hold more of that, in case you needed it, you would have to come before the board and say, we're exceeding our cash balance.
That's correct. And remember, Madam President, this is year-end cash
Yeah,
balance.
it
So
can-
right
it
as
can
an example, right now, we're at
fluctuate within
72.1 million. That certainly exceeds that amount.
There was an incident where board used to just keep piling the money up, and then it came hard times at the legislature, so they just took credit for the money. So
Madam
this is a
President,
good balance of being able to cover ourselves, and if there is some above what our emergency is, then we'll be able to use it for something, as he points out, for the student. But you don't really want to build it too large, because
Unless
people
there's
in
a
Santa Fe say,
reason we'd need it.
right. And Madam President, we think this gives enough flexibility that should we have something that's cascading down upon us, we would come and thoughtfully increase our scope of our cash balance. I mean, it would be about this time of year you would see that coming. And so we would come in and say, we would like to target instead of this 10%, let's say, as an example, because of that consequence. Let's assume for a minute that we had some huge catastrophic loss here, and we were notified that our insurance liability rate would increase by double. Right now you pay about 8 million-ish, 4 million on liability.
About five,
and
yes,
about
yes,
5
that's
million on
correct.
liability July the 1st. If you had some huge monumental settlement or loss, it's conceivable that you would get a rate increase come from NIMSIA that would say you're going to be at $9 million as your first check. We would immediately come to you and recommend we extend the cash. This year, we would pare back year-end expenditures so that we could make, because that payment's due on 1 July. Then we would manage it that way, but it would be public, which would allow then, to Mr. Davis's point, for everybody to understand this isn't pigeonholing dollars. The history to this, the Unison JAL districts years ago had a board policy that required that they hold 1 full year's reserve. And they did it as a hedge against consolidation. When I was public school finance chief, to Mr. Davis's point, there was legislation that would take credit for all cash balances that exceeded 5%. And that legislation did not pass, but it raises that political specter if we carry too much cash. And so this kind of shoots the gap in between the two of those, Madam President. You could raise the 7.5% to a different level if the board so desired, and we certainly, from a financial standpoint, you'd love to hold 10%. But from an operational standpoint, for staffing and salaries and things like that, that's probably too much of a reserve as a planned reserve.
Thank you for that explanation. Yes, Dr. Vogt.
Over the last 3 years, what has our reserve been?
Actually, over the past 3 years, we have not had a designated reserve. However, the anticipated, if we put into place the 5%, that's approximately, más o menos, $8 million. Over the past several years, since Mr. Rounds has been there, and I think that this year may be the only exception to that, at year end, our cash balance has been close, if not exceeded that amount every year for the past several years.
So we would believe that we would target, just to be very candid with you, an amount of about 6.5 to 7% as your year-end landing point. That really is our continuing targeting that we do. This year, because of situations, we're going to land a little shy of that probably. In the past, you've watched us manage our budgets into a little bit higher range, but in no cases, Terry, did we pass the 7.5% threshold. I don't believe.
I think one year we
One year
might
we were
have,
close.
but that was the year that we were holding money for the, the adoption. What was that, English?
English adoption. And so, Madam President, see if we see that coming, we think it's fair policy to come to the board and ask for a waiver of policy to meet that situational need and just be open and honest with everybody that that's what we're doing. And so that's,
And this is, since this policy says we will not be no lower than 5%, what happens if we drop below that? I mean, that's something that you said you'll have to keep that 5% in there?
Well, we can
Or
always,
you'll have to ask if you're.
we'll have to ask to go below and we'd project that again.
anytime we want, we can make exception to our own policy.
Right. I'm just wondering, so we will now be prepared to have those requests if it happens.
Madam President, that would be the technique. Now, what it does on the bond side is it gives the bond companies, rating companies, they understand that you can waive your policy, so they'll watch your practice on that. But this will give more affirmation to your fiscal management practice that we have practiced since we've been here. We've been able to show our history and argue that that's where we are. They've always reiterated they would prefer policy to support that, because I always suggest, what if Mr. Dean and I were to perish in an airplane accident or something, and where would your future be? In this management team, they don't have the concern, but as always, they have a concern with what is the board's continuing practice expectations.
Thank you for answering all of those questions. Are there any more questions from board members? Then this will go out on the website, and we have a second and third reading. Is that correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Thank you. Then moving on to our first reading of policy JFA.
And we're going to ask Ms. Galvan to step in for Dr. Sanchez, since I let him get on the road, and they're probably only about 3 hours away from being there now.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and Mr. Rounds. We have for you tonight JFA, which is a policy that you updated last September. However, we're wanting to bring it back again for some additional language. I think it's been unprecedented, what's happening this year with custodial parents who are divorced and are trying to make decisions on where their children go to school. More than ever, we have seen parents, the mother wants to enroll the child here, and then the child is there, and then the father comes and disenrolls them and puts them in another school. Then the mother disenrolls them and this has happened so many times this year. It's become obvious that we need to have something in writing so that we can delegate how that's going to go, because it's putting the child in the middle, and it also puts the school district in the middle. So we are going to address that in regulation, and we need to have the language in the policy in order to address a situation where both parents share custody. We also think that in your policy, we're taking out some language that really has to do with procedural of what kind of documents we require when children do get registered. All of that is better served in the regulation. And then we need to address when a parent is unable to register a child. Many times we have people who are sick, or they are their care is being taken care of the neighbor, the aunt, the friend, and we have to have something that deals with the caretaker's authorization. So we're adding that in as well. So we are asking for you to have this as a first reading. We'll be bringing it back 2 more times. We'll put it on the website, and I stand for any questions.
Are there any questions?
Well, I just thought, if the child goes to the grandma's house, can they register at the grandma's house?
They can if the grandmother is the caretaker and has filled out the form and has the correct authorization to be the caretaker.
Like during the day, caretaker during the day?
Permanently, like they are the one that is in charge, responsible for the child. Perhaps the mother, we've had situations here, the mother is in a hospital long-term, the father is in jail, now the aunt is the caregiver. And so they're the ones that can do the registration procedures.
And they will be registered at that person's address?
Yes.
Oh, all right.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we have another reading of policy IHC, after-school programs.
And I believe Ms. Porteso, or Linda's going to come up and take that one. Is that correct?
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, Madam President, board members, Mr. Rounds. First of all, I do want to say math is just wonderful.
Yeah, amen.
Before you is a brand-new policy, policy IHC, after-school programs. And the purpose of this policy is to establish procedures for the operation of a quality academic and extracurricular after-school program that provides a safe environment within our district. The policy will define the key elements of the school programs, and this also includes not just after school, but any Saturday programs we may have from pre-kinder through grade 12, the night school and credit recovery programs. It also requires a program that outlines the goals and the budget and any health and other regulations this particular program is going to be offering, including how parents are going to be informed. It also, the plans will be presented to Dr. Sanchez, who will then in turn, do those proposals to the superintendent. I've been charged with forming a committee of the after-school programs to write the procedures as this policy moves along. And just for information, we have about 24 schools that offer after-school programs that are federally funded out of Title I or a 21st Century grant. Plus, we also have some community programs that offer similar programs in our community. So this particular policy will outline the regulations to offer those quality after-school programs. This will be a first reading.
Mr. Davis.
I have a question. I went to a school there for one of my items, but there was an after-school program, but they evidently were a commercial after-school program. How does that work?
I believe that is probably either, I need to know what school, but I know our city also has a partnership that offers a recreation after-school program in some of our elementary schools. So you have Title I funded, grant funded, then you have some community base that work with the building principal directly. What this will help us do is sort of outline the correct procedures on notification and so on within this policy, Mr. Davis.
And all of them report to your office, or
I wish.
you keep track of them anyway?
She'd like to coordinate at one point. They're diversified some, but as Erlinda said, she's taking on a task force that will give us sort of the regulatory guidance about how we want to manage that. So we're cutting it all from about the same perspective as you move across. And that, we just think that's a necessary step at this point.
And I believe Dr. Sanchez said that we would be able to see that regulation maybe even before
Yes.
we get through the third reading here, so.
Yes.
That's our intention, Madam President, to bring it so you can take a look at that.
Okay, are there any other questions?
And it'll go on through the same process, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir, and that
First,
so we'll go
second, and
through all
third.
the notification.
And thank you for putting this together. I will thank you, Superintendent Rounds, for moving this policy forward, and Dr. Sanchez.
And Madam President, I'll just note, see how well it goes without Dr. Sanchez here? Not just just kidding.
Okay.
Be an honor.
Moving on, we have do we have any board member reports this evening?
I just have one thing to say. I went to the New Mexico School Board Association meeting up there, and the board of directors voted for a $1,000 scholarship for each region. But they're working a little differently. Each district within that region can submit one name. So whoever that goes, will have to figure out some system to sort them out for Las Cruces, and then Alamogordo will do their one person and so on, because,
And then the region has to
and then the
send
region
one.
scrunches it down to one, okay?
Okay,
But as the
Thank you.
details will be coming to us.
all right. Board member reports?
I have a lot.
Ms. Hall?
I've had fun since our last meeting. In attempting to be better educated for myself about the initiatives, I continue to attend the aspiring administrators sessions. At the last meeting, they looked at test scores and how to better interpret them for themselves and for teachers they might be working with. It was much like the two mid-school meetings with Mrs. Fletcher and the principals from the turnaround mid-schools. I attended those, and they looked at the same data and worked very diligently about how to talk to teachers about not saying, why did you do that, but what's the good thing that you did do, and how can we improve on it. I went to, at the foundation meeting, NIDA is doing a wonderful job of organizing the foundation and getting things really pulled together. Last meeting, Jane and Pete gave an overview of the teacher mentoring program and how they help new teachers or struggling teachers. Another thing that the foundation board has done, the applications for the foundation scholarship have been upgraded and are ready for spring. Those applications were a little loose earlier. A new accounting software system is being purchased. The annual campaign I've mentioned before for April is, excuse me. I'm reading the wrong thing. The annual campaign to get funds for the foundation is approaching, and we'll use phone bank to contact people who have given earlier. Comcast Day is going to be at Mesilla Elementary. I think you all saw that in the report this week, and they're delighted, I understand. Naida said the teacher did handsprings down the hall when they asked her if she was interested. The Celebration of Excellence plans for the annual dinner are going forward, and those things are being moved along. I went to the LEAP program for the IEP with parents. There were about 10 parents there and a great facilitator. They were really involved and interested. I went to a data meeting at Valley View with Andrea, with the principal. That was interesting, and she's working very diligently to help her teachers be better with kids. And I attended the Cruces High with my little neighbor across the street who's going to be at Cruces next year from Zia, with the 8th grade orientation, and it was really great. They had quite a few people and very interesting presentations.
Thank you. You've been busy.
I have.
And Dr. Votaw, do you have anything this evening?
I did visit Doña Ana at a data meeting, and I continue to be impressed with the kind of dialogue our teachers are having about student performance.
Thank you. That moves us to upcoming events. If you look in your packet, we have our calendar of events, and thank you to Tina for putting all of our May dates down so we can mark our calendars for graduation ceremonies and senior awards. If there are no other questions,
I move for adjournment.
thank you.
I second the move.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board.
Yay! How are you? Celebration.
Excuse me, could I address the board with a quick question? Sure. I wanted to follow up. Excuse me.
Personally, no, but I do, I think someone can say.
Well, you've already answered it, sir. Excuse me, could I address the board for a quick question? I'm here to follow up on a correspondence that I've sent on 2 separate occasions addressed to the school board. One was sent mid-December, regular mail. A second was sent mid-January. Return receipt requested. It was received, although no follow-up response has been made. My name is Frank Vega. The letter was sent on behalf of my boy, Jeremy Vega. He's a low-incident special ed student at Mesa Middle School. Has any of the board members seen reference to that letter? Yes, we've already addressed the special ed department. We've addressed the superintendent as well. Our request was made to grant special circumstance for related services transportation. I understand, sir. So we shouldn't, no response should be sent, or what's going to happen there? Well, state level due process was dismissed without prejudice pending response of this correspondence. I've spoke to her. Can I get a response from the board? It should be. The letter was addressed to the board. I think they should have received it.